Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
Please be seated. By the way, it was everything I could do to not stand up and give you all an ovation. I mean, why am I? I'm the rector of this place. At least I could be able to stand up and thank you for your beautiful music. Wow. I read an article recently that grabbed my attention. The headline read, "Why are fewer people choosing to have kids?" It quoted the Pew Research Center survey. The proportion of adults in the United States younger than 50 years old who do not have children is growing, leaping from 37% in 2018 to 47% in 2000. I became a fan of the Pew Research Center when I found myself studying church attendance in seminary. Average Episcopalian invites someone to church once every 17 years. That is why it's packed in here today. Sorry if you couldn't find a seat. I love statistics. Easy ones, and I have been the top 10 reasons why people are choosing not to have children.
Too expensive.
We know children.
Okay. That is in the survey. I'll tell you which number.
Teenage years are...
The expense, by the way, is number 4.
Wow.
Even though back in time, 10 years ago, they were saying somebody only gets established in their 30s financially. They're now saying late 40s.
Oi! Oi!
So don't be discouraged out there. All right?
Good luck with that.
So that was number. They do have, let me see what numbers I went to. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Don't really like children.
Oh, well, I love children.
Okay, I didn't know what you were implying by that.
But childbearing might be an issue.
Oh, okay. So, anyway, that number, they don't have children. That may be why you are here at this service as opposed to the last one, but I'll let you figure that one out. There's certainly medical issues. Finding agreement with a partner, but look at, because they divide to the state of the world, the trauma, the darkness. Now, the question is, do we recognize that? Do we recognize the impact that's having on us? Do we understand that we are traumatized? Have we opened ourselves up to understand that? This is what I studied on my sabbatical, so you're stuck with me. But it raises this question, initially, why did God choose a particular time to have a baby? Why did she choose the year 0? Of course, I'm joking about the year 0 because it was actually in the Anno Mundi calendar 5,500. And then when the calendar we currently use was established, as they studied it, they estimate that Jesus was probably born in the year 4. That's another sermon. But I've always had a theological problem with Christmas. I used to feel sorry for those who lived before Christmas. All those winters without Christmas, to use a line from C.S. Lewis. How sad. Winter without Christmas. But then reading Isaiah, blows my mind. His words are proof that Christmas existed centuries before the birth of Christ. In other words, even before the historical birth of Christ, there was a deep awareness that God was being birthed in the world. It was a logical conclusion. It was a spiritual understanding. People who went deep saw it happening. And what do Westerners do about it? They call it prophecy. It was a good guess. But Isaiah doesn't speak about it that way. For a child has been born for us, a son given to us. Authority rests upon his shoulders, and he is named Wonderful, Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. Handel composes his masterpiece not from Christian literature, but from Hebrew literature. We need to remember that if we go deep within our own souls, in the deepest places where we question, even deeper than that, there is an understanding of a God who comes and meets us in the depths of who we are, in the darkness, in the generational trauma. I mean, if the world would just understand we're in generational trauma, it's not a matter of negotiation. We are in a traumatized world. Isaiah's statement models that deep within our soul is a profound awareness of the spiritual and bodily presence of God. Deep in our spiritual search, we know that God must be vulnerable, not just intellectually, but in every way, including sharing our very flesh. His incarnation was and is to come. That good news is not dependent on history as much as it is on the spiritual quest and spiritual awareness. Now, only 2 of our 4 Gospels mention this historical birth of Jesus. But there's another Gospel, John. There are 2 other Gospels, but speaking about John, that in its own way has a Christmas story. The incarnation, the embodiment of God in our very bodies is not just a historical blip on the screen, but is intertwined in the very fabric of all that is. John puts it this way. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God. All things came into being through him. And without him, none of these things came into being. What has come into being in him was life, and the life was the light of all people. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. And the Word became flesh and lived among us, and we have seen his glory, the glory as a Father's only Son, full of grace and truth. That is a Christmas story. That is a Christmas story that doesn't need the birth of Christ. That is a Christmas story about the fact that this manifestation of a birth that is so intimately vulnerable, fleshy, and so interested in this profound connection to who we are in the story and the darkness we experience in our own lives. That is the Christmas story. Long before Christmas happened, so to speak. What we do know about the historical moment where this deep spiritual truth manifested itself was that it was a time of extreme darkness. It was as if God said to themselves, now is the time, because it is a time of deep darkness. Or maybe now people can't help but see the light because it is so dark. Mirroring John's comment about darkness, Isaiah also says, the people who walked in darkness have seen a great light. Those who lived in a land of deep darkness, on them light has shined. I guess you could say that it was a terrible time to bring a child into the world. Stunningly terrible time. God does not think the way we think. The trauma of being occupied and threatened. The fear of being forced to take a dangerous journey to register for a census that would be used to tax you, control you, oppress you in every way. For a census that would be used to destroy you, suffocate you. The trauma of seeing what happened to those who resisted. Giving birth on the move with nowhere to lay your head. The Christmas story has a lot to say to those being threatened by our political powers. Children crying in schools because they don't know what's going to happen. Giving birth with nowhere to lay your head. G.K. Chesterton said Christmas is built upon a beautiful and intentional paradox that the birth of the homeless should be celebrated in every home. Add to this the personal stress this couple was facing. It was profoundly alienating in that culture to be pregnant and unmarried. What self-doubt and mistrust must have been present for Mary and Joseph? And did the angels really help? Really? Someone comes in and says, hey, forget that, move on. What of the tension between this couple? All Joseph knew for sure was that he was not the father. That's his certainty. Oh, by the way, I'm an angel? Yeah, don't worry about it. These are human beings feeling shame, doubt, distrust, anger, sorrow. Trauma research in the last several decades has shown that trauma gets lodged in our bodies. It's not just, oh, I have these terrible thoughts, if I can just change these thoughts. The body becomes this place, and it makes perfect sense evolutionary wise, because it's what you see in animals when they know how to respond. If you wake up at 3 a.m, that's your body feeling threatened. That's what happens. You feel under threat. And to be with your body, to be invited to the flesh of who you are that has been traumatized by whatever it was, whatever is ongoing in your life, is to be invited into the presence of God. In fact, what does the scripture refer to our body as? The temple of God. The temple you are sitting with right now. You are in this temple. This temple has memory. This temple has a reaction. It goes deep into you. There are things that we don't even know, perhaps, about our story because it's generational. And so this invitation to go deeper into the body is huge. Dr. Van der Kolk's book, millions of people have read it. The body keeps the score. Trauma, according to him, is the source of all ill health, or much of it. that trauma, when it's not examined, welcomed, opened up to, sits lodged in our body. And they have found that soldiers coming back from war with traumatic, post-traumatic stress disorder can't just talk it through. There has to be a deeper place where you encounter this somatic reality. And this is exactly what the stories and theologians throughout our traditions have said about this incarnation. It's not a blip in history that we have to go back and look at. In fact, trauma is not what happened to you. Trauma is how you reacted to what happened to you. That stays with you. The trauma may be in the past, but you keep reacting, we keep reacting to the trauma because it's lodged in our culture, the body of our culture, the body of our politic, the body of who we are, our very bodies. And so this wonderful story about a birth of a vulnerable child, a fleshy child, a story about God coming to us, not just in story, but in reality, in our somatic need to find healing. It's such a beautiful story. So, it was a traumatic and terrible time to have a child. But that is kind of the whole point. The whole point is this is where we truly do the work in our spiritual lives. This is where we join God in vulnerability, gaining the courage to be tender, to be open to ourselves, to learn to have compassion about who we are, what our story has meant and what it can mean. And there enters this light. So let that be the light. Let that be the light on this Christmas for all of us. That God is so present, deeper than we possibly can know, waiting for us to welcome, to become vulnerable, to discover that in what we think is going to remain deep, deep darkness, light begins to shine. For unto us a child is born. Unto us, all of us, a child is given.